The Last Signal Home. Chapter 1, Silence. The morning Kepler 442c died, Milena Vasquez was 3 kilometers underground, calibrating seismic sensors in Mining Station 7. The first thing she noticed wasn't the screaming that echoed down the ventilation shafts, or the emergency klaxons that began wailing 30 seconds later. It was the silence. The planet's heartbeat, that constant, rhythmic thrum of atmospheric processors, fusion generators, and the 10,000 machines that kept New Valencia alive, simply stopped. Milena's hands froze over the sensor array's control panel. In her 4 years as a geophysicist on humanity's most distant colony, she had never heard such complete quiet. Even during the scheduled maintenance blackouts, backup systems hummed softly in the background. This was different. This was the sound of death. The communicator on her belt crackled with static, then resolved into the panicked voice of Colony Director Martinez. All stations, this is New Valencia Control. We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack by unknown forces. All personnel implement emergency protocol Omega immediately. Seek shelter in. The transmission cut to white noise. Milena's training kicked in before her conscious mind could process the words. Emergency Protocol Omega, the nightmare scenario they'd drilled for but never believed would happen. Hostile alien contact. Colony compromised. Prepare for evacuation or extended isolation. She grabbed her emergency kit from its wall mounting, water purification tablets, high-energy rations, medical supplies, and a portable fusion cell that could power basic equipment for weeks. Her fingers moved with practiced efficiency, but her mind raced. Aliens. After 2 centuries of expansion across the galaxy, humanity had found thousands of worlds with the building blocks of life, dozens with complex ecosystems, but never anything that could be called intelligent. Until now. The mining station's elevator shaft stretched up toward the surface like a throat. Milena stared at the call button, knowing that pressing it might be the last decision she ever made. Protocol Omega called for immediate evacuation to designated safe zones, but what if the surface was already lost? As if in answer to her question, the lights flickered and died. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in angry red. The facility's automated voice began its death song, primary power offline. Backup fusion reactor critical. Estimated time to system failure, 6 hours, 37 minutes. Milena pressed the call button. The elevator climbed through layers of sedimentary rock, past geological strata that told the story of Kepler 442c's 4 billion-year history. She had studied these formations for years, learning to read the planet's past in stone and mineral veins. Now she might be witnessing its future. 2 kilometers up, the elevator shuddered to a halt. The doors opened onto Sublevel 3, where the colony's main data archives were housed. Emergency lighting cast dancing shadows between rows of quantum storage units, each one containing the accumulated knowledge of human civilization. The evacuation protocol was clear: if the surface was lost, preserve what could be preserved. Milena sprinted between the storage units, pulling data cores from their housings. Scientific databases, cultural archives, historical records, she grabbed everything she could carry. If she was going to die on this distant world, at least some fragment of humanity would survive with her. The elevator resumed its climb. 1 kilometer to surface level. The walls here showed scorch marks from mining operations, places where humanity had carved deep to extract the rare earth elements that made Kepler 442c valuable enough to colonize despite its distance from Earth. The irony wasn't lost on her: they had come here to mine the planet's bones, and now those same bones might be their tomb. 500 meters. 300. 100. The elevator stopped at surface level 1, and Milena held her breath as the doors opened. The corridor beyond was intact but empty. Emergency lighting flickered like dying stars. The air recycling system wheezed with mechanical distress. But no immediate signs of attack or invasion. Milena allowed herself a moment of hope before moving toward the main exit. The colony's central hub had been built inside a natural cavern, a vast underground space reinforced with titanium steel supports. Above, a transparent aluminum dome provided natural light during Kepler 442c's long days and spectacular views of the triple-star system that warmed this world. The dome was designed to retract during atmospheric storms, sealing the colony safely underground. Now it was gone. Not retracted, gone. The dome and its support structure had been reduced to twisted metal scattered across the cavern floor. Where blue sky should have been visible, Milena saw only darkness punctuated by the occasional streak of light. Ship engines, she realized. The attackers were still up there. Bodies lay scattered throughout the central plaza. Colonists who had been going about their daily routines when death fell from the sky. Dr. Kim from the Botanical Gardens, still clutching a hybrid tomato plant she'd been taking to market. The Volkov children, their school books scattered like broken wings around them. Milena forced herself to look away. Grief was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not yet. She made her way through the devastation toward the communications center, stepping carefully around debris and the dead. If there was any chance of contacting Earth or the nearest colony ship, the quantum entanglement transmitter would be her only hope. The device used paired particles to send instantaneous messages across any distance, though the energy requirements meant it could only be used for the most critical communications. The communications center was a reinforced bunker built into the cavern's north wall. Its blast doors hung open, revealing the smoking wreckage within. The quantum transmitter had been specifically targeted, its exotic matter containment field ruptured. The delicate quantum foam that enabled faster-than-light communication had collapsed back into normal space-time, taking with it humanity's only link to home. Smart bastards, Milena whispered. Cut off the colony's ability to call for help before beginning the attack. This wasn't random violence or territorial aggression. This was systematic, planned extermination. She was backing away from the ruined communications center when she heard it, a low hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The sound grew louder, and shadows began moving across the cavern ceiling. Through the gaps in the destroyed dome, Milena caught glimpses of the attackers' ships. They were beautiful and terrible, organic curves that suggested they had been grown rather than built, surfaces that shifted between colors like oil on water. The ships moved with predatory grace, circling the colony like sharks around wounded prey. Energy weapons lanced down from their bellies, probing for signs of life among the ruins. Milena ran. She sprinted across the plaza toward the emergency shelters built into the cavern's walls, her boots slipping on debris and worse things she didn't want to identify. Behind her, the alien ships descended lower, their humming song rising in pitch. Scanning beams swept across the ground in geometric patterns, and wherever they passed, fires bloomed. The nearest shelter was 100 meters away. 50. 20. A beam of coherent energy struck the ground beside her, and the rock-reach surface erupted in a shower of molten stone. The heat wave that followed lifted her off her feet and threw her forward into the shelter's entrance. The blast doors were already sealed, but the manual override was functional. Milena's fingers danced over the control panel, entering her authorization codes. The massive doors groaned open just wide enough for her to squeeze through, then slammed shut with a vibration she felt in her bones. The emergency shelter was a cube carved directly from the bedrock, lined with radiation shielding and stocked with supplies for 50 people. It was designed to protect the colonists from solar flares, atmospheric storms, and the 1,000 other ways Kepler 442c could kill the unprepared. It had never been tested against alien weapons. Milena collapsed against the inner door, breathing hard. Her hands shook as she activated the shelter's minimal lighting system. Around her, supply crates stood in neat rows: food, water, medical equipment, tools. Everything needed to wait out a crisis and emerge to rebuild. But there would be no rebuilding. Not this time. She made her way to the communications console, a basic unit designed for short-range contact with other shelters and emergency coordination. The display flickered to life, showing a map of the colony with shelter locations marked in blue. Most of the markers were dark, no response to automated status pings. But 13 shelters still showed active. 13 out of 47. Milena keyed the general emergency frequency. This is Dr. Milena Vasquez in Shelter 12. Does anyone copy? Please respond. Static answered her for long seconds. Then, crackling through interference, Milena? Thank God. This is James Chen in Shelter 7. Are you injured? Chen. The colony's chief engineer, a brilliant man who could fix anything and had tried to teach Milena to play chess during their long shifts monitoring the atmospheric processors. Hearing his voice was like finding water in a desert. I'm okay, she replied. What's your status? Shaken but alive. We've got 16 people here, families from residential Block C who made it to shelter when the attack started. You? Just me. The words tasted bitter. James, what are we dealing with? Did you see the ships? Negative on visual contact. We were already sealed when it started. But I've been monitoring passive sensors. The attackers have withdrawn to orbital positions, but they're still up there. Waiting. For what? Unknown. Could be making sure everyone's dead before they leave. Could be preparing for a second wave. Could be. The transmission cut off in a burst of static. Milena tried to re-establish contact, but the communications array showed massive interference across all frequencies. Something was jamming them. She was alone again. Milena spent the next hour trying to reach other shelters, with limited success. Brief contacts with 3 more groups revealed a total of 47 survivors scattered across the colony. 47 out of nearly 3,000. The aliens, whoever they were, had been thorough. As night fell across Kepler 442c, Milena heard new sounds filtering through the rock above, the groan of settling debris, the whisper of wind through broken structures, and something else. Footsteps. The measured tread of something heavy moving across the surface. The shelter's external sensors were crude but functional. Milena activated the perimeter display and watched thermal signatures move across the screen. Humanoid shapes, roughly 2 meters tall, walking in formation through the ruins. Their body temperature was lower than human baseline, cold-blooded or wearing environmental suits. The search parties worked systematically, investigating every structure, every potential hiding place. When they found sealed shelters, they deployed devices that appeared to scan through solid rock. Looking for survivors. Looking for her. Milena watched the thermal signatures for hours, learning their patterns. The searchers were methodical but not infinitely patient. They spent perhaps 10 minutes investigating each shelter before moving on. More importantly, they seemed unable to detect active power sources through sufficient rock thickness. The emergency shelter's passive shielding was keeping her hidden. For now. When dawn came, the search parties withdrew to their ships. But they left behind something new, a network of sensor nodes scattered throughout the colony. Small, spider-like devices that scuttled into corners and crevices, weaving an invisible web of surveillance across the ruins. The hunters had become patient. Milena opened a supply crate and extracted a meal packet, synthetic protein flavored to approximate beef stew. She ate mechanically while studying the colony map, looking for patterns, escape routes, anything that might give her an advantage. The mining operations had honeycombed the area beneath New Valencia with tunnels and service passages. Most connected to the main elevator system, but some, particularly the older exploration shafts, extended beyond the colony's immediate perimeter. If she could reach one of those outlying passages, she might be able to surface beyond the sensor network and attempt an overland escape. But escape to where? Kepler 442c was a harsh world, its atmosphere barely breathable and its surface scoured by radiation from the triple-star system. The nearest human settlement was 17 light-years away, an impossible journey even if she could somehow steal an alien ship. No. Escape wasn't the answer. Survival was. Milena spent the day mapping possible routes through the underground tunnel network, using geological surveys and mining records stored in her portable data unit. The colony's excavations had followed natural faults and/or veins, creating a maze that extended for kilometers in all directions. Somewhere in that maze, there had to be a place where 47 humans could hide until rescue arrived. If rescue ever came. The thought of spending years, perhaps decades, trapped underground while the aliens gradually hunted down the remaining survivors was almost too horrible to contemplate. But the alternative was immediate death, and Milena Vasquez had not traveled 17 light-years from Earth to give up without a fight. She keyed the emergency frequency one more time. All stations, this is Shelter 12. I have a proposal. Chapter 2, The Underground. The response came faster than expected, crackling through the interference that plagued their communications. Dr. Vasquez, this is Chen. We're listening. Milena spread the geological maps across the shelter's small table, their digital displays casting blue light across her face. The aliens have us pinned down, but they don't know the underground like we do. Every mining operation for the past 4 years has been mapped and surveyed. I'm looking at over 300 kilometers of tunnels, most of them extending well beyond the colony perimeter. You're talking about the deep mines, came another voice, Dr. Sarah Okafor, the colonial physician. Those passages haven't been used in months. Some of the older sections don't even have atmospheric processors. Which makes them perfect hiding places, Milena replied. The aliens are looking for active settlements, powered facilities. They won't expect us to go deeper underground. Chen's voice carried a note of skepticism. And then what? We can't live down there indefinitely. We don't have to. Milena traced her finger along a network of tunnels that extended toward the planet's southern continent. Mining Survey Team Beta established forward camps 200 kilometers south of here 6 months ago. They were exploring rare earth deposits in the Meridian Mountains. If those camps are still intact, they'd have communications equipment, Okafor finished. Long-range transmitters for reporting back to the mining consortium on Earth. Exactly. And more importantly, the camps were established after the quantum entanglement network went online. There might be backup QE transmitters there, units that weren't targeted in the initial attack because the aliens didn't know they existed. The comm channel fell silent as the survivors considered the implications. A working quantum entanglement transmitter could reach Earth instantaneously, carrying word of the attack and coordinates for rescue operations. It was a slim hope, but it was hope. The journey would be dangerous, Chen said finally. Those deep tunnels cross unstable geological zones. Some of them flood during the seasonal rains. Less dangerous than staying here and waiting for the aliens to dig us out, Milena replied. I've been monitoring their search patterns. They're systematic, patient. Give them time, and they'll find every shelter, every hiding place. Another voice joined the conversation, Marcus Webb, the colony's security chief. I'm tracking movement on passive sensors. The aliens have established permanent outposts around the colony perimeter. They're not leaving. This is an occupation, not a raid. The implications of Webb's observations settled over the comm channel like a weight. An occupation meant the aliens intended to stay, to thoroughly examine their conquest. Every day the survivors remained near the colony increased the chances of discovery. I'm willing to try it, Okafor said. My group has mostly families with children. We can't fight, but we can run. Same here, agreed Chen. The deep mines are a hell of a gamble, but better than slow starvation in these shelters. One by one, the other groups checked in. 47 survivors scattered across 13 shelters, united by desperation and the fading hope of rescue. They would attempt the impossible, a journey through 200 kilometers of abandoned mining tunnels to reach camps that might no longer exist, carrying equipment that might not work, to send a message that might never be received. It was insane. It was also their only chance. Milena coordinated the evacuation for the following night, when the alien search parties would be inactive. Each group would carry emergency supplies and whatever equipment might prove useful, portable fusion cells, atmospheric processors, medical supplies, and the precious data cores containing humanity's accumulated knowledge. The journey would take them through some of the most challenging underground terrain on Kepler 442c. Ancient lava tubes carved through the planetary crust, their walls lined with crystalline formations that could cut like glass. Flooded chambers where underground rivers had carved vast caverns from the bedrock. Unstable zones where seismic activity could bring down thousands of tons of rock without warning. Milena had spent years studying these formations, but academic knowledge was different from navigating them in darkness while carrying the last hope of human civilization. As night fell, she began her own preparations. The emergency shelter's supplies included a full environmental suit, bulky but necessary for extended travel through unprocessed atmosphere. She packed carefully: water recycling unit, high-energy rations, portable geological scanner, emergency medical kit, and a quantum storage unit containing copies of the colony's scientific databases. Everything else would have to be left behind. The shelter's blast doors opened with hydraulic precision, revealing the tomb that had once been New Valencia. Emergency lighting from other shelters provided scattered illumination across the cavern, creating pools of pale light separated by vast stretches of darkness. In that darkness, Milena could see the red eyes of alien sensor nodes, watching and waiting. She activated the environmental suit's stealth mode, a civilian adaptation of military technology that scattered thermal signatures and minimized electromagnetic emissions. It wouldn't fool dedicated sensors, but it might buy her precious seconds if she encountered alien patrols. The route to the deep mining access began at the cavern's western wall, where a maintenance tunnel connected to the primary elevator shaft. Milena moved carefully through the debris field, using fallen support beams and scattered equipment for cover. The alien sensors tracked motion through sophisticated algorithms, but they were designed to detect deliberate movement patterns. Random, irregular motion, the way debris might shift in thermal updrafts, was largely ignored. She reached the maintenance tunnel without incident and paused to check her position. Behind her, other survivors were beginning their own evacuations, following routes planned to minimize the chances of simultaneous detection. If the aliens discovered one group, the others might still escape. The maintenance tunnel descended steeply into the bedrock, its walls lined with power conduits and atmospheric processing equipment. Most of the systems were dead, but a few backup units still hummed with residual power. Milena followed the tunnel for over a kilometer before reaching the main elevator shaft. The shaft was a vertical wound in the planet's crust, 3 meters wide and extending down into geological antiquity. Emergency maintenance ladders provided the only means of descent now that the primary elevator was destroyed. Milena clipped her safety line to the ladder system and began climbing down into darkness. The shaft walls told the story of Kepler 442c's formation. Sedimentary layers from ancient oceans, igneous intrusions from periods of volcanic activity, and the occasional fossil of primitive life forms that had existed before the planet's atmosphere changed. Milena had descended this shaft hundreds of times as part of her geological surveys, but never under these circumstances. At the 2-kilometer mark, she reached the entrance to Mining Complex Delta, a sprawling network of tunnels that extended toward the planet's southern regions. The complex had been among the colony's most productive operations before being abandoned when the main or veins played out. Emergency lighting flickered fitfully in the main tunnel, powered by geothermal taps that drew energy from the planet's molten core. The air was breathable but stale, processed by automated systems that hadn't seen maintenance in months. Milena's environmental suit filtered out the worst contaminants while her portable scanner mapped the tunnel network ahead. The complex was vast, dozens of major passages branching into hundreds of smaller shafts, most following natural fault lines through the bedrock. Navigation would be challenging even with detailed maps, and Milena knew that some of the passages had changed since the surveys were completed. Seismic activity was constant on Kepler 442c, reshaping the underground landscape in subtle but significant ways. She had descended 3 levels and traveled nearly 5 kilometers when she encountered the first survivors. They were huddled in a side passage, 8 people clustered around a failing fusion cell that provided their only light and heat. Chen's group, she realized, families from residential Block C who had somehow navigated the complex tunnel system ahead of her. Dr. Vasquez. Chen rose as she approached, his face showing relief and exhaustion in equal measure. "We thought we'd lost you in the shaft." Navigation was trickier than expected, Milena replied, studying the group. 3 adults and 5 children, their faces pale in the fusion cell's blue glow. The youngest couldn't be more than 6 years old, Elena Kowalski, whose parents had been among the colony's agricultural specialists. Status report, she requested. We've made good time through the main passages, Chin replied. But we're running into problems ahead. Tunnel C7 is flooded, looks like a seasonal water table shift. And we're detecting unstable atmospheric readings in several of the deeper shafts. Milena consulted her geological scanner, comparing real-time readings with the stored survey data. Chin was right, water infiltration had blocked several key passages, and atmospheric processing in the deeper levels was minimal. They would need to find alternate routes, adding distance and time to an already dangerous journey. How long until the others catch up, she asked. Webb's group should be here within the hour. Okafor's people are moving slower, they've got injured to carry. The mention of injuries reminded Milena that they were operating without the colony's medical facilities. Dr. Okafor was skilled, but her resources were limited to what could be carried in emergency packs. Any serious injury during the journey could prove fatal. We need to establish a temporary camp, Milena decided. Somewhere defensible where we can rest and plan the next stage. Chin pointed deeper into the complex. There's a natural cavern about 2 kilometers ahead, part of the old survey network. It's got geothermal heating and multiple exit routes. They gathered their equipment and continued deeper into the maze. The tunnel floor was uneven, carved from native rock and reinforced with polymer supports where needed. Emergency lighting provided intermittent illumination, creating a landscape of harsh shadows and sudden brightness. The cavern Chin had mentioned was impressive, a natural formation 3 times the size of the emergency shelters, with walls of crystalline stone that sparkled in their lights. Geothermal vents along the floor provided steady warmth, and the space had multiple access tunnels leading in different directions. More importantly, it was easily defended. A small group could control access through the main entrances while monitoring the smaller passages for threats. As they established their temporary camp, other survivors began arriving. Webb's security team, well-equipped and moving with military precision. Dr. Okafor's medical group, slower but carrying vital supplies and expertise. Smaller groups and individuals who had navigated the complex tunnel system through determination and luck. By dawn, though they had no way to see the sun from their underground refuge, 43 of the original 47 survivors had reached the cavern. 4 were missing, presumably lost in the tunnels or captured during the evacuation. The mathematics of survival were brutal but simple. Every life lost reduced their collective chances of reaching the mining camps. Milena called a general meeting as the survivors settled into their temporary refuge. Faces illuminated by fusion cells and emergency lights, showing exhaustion, fear, and grim determination. We've made good progress, she began, but we're still 150 kilometers from the mining camps. The route ahead is challenging, flooded passages, unstable atmospheric zones, and terrain that hasn't been surveyed in months. She activated her portable display, showing a 3-dimensional map of the tunnel network. Red zones marked known hazards, while green lines indicated possible routes. We have 3 options. The direct route through the primary mining tunnels, fastest but most likely to be monitored if the aliens have extended their surveillance network. The secondary route through the natural cave systems, longer but more defensible. And the deep route through the thermal vents, dangerous but completely hidden from surface detection. Webb studied the display with professional interest. What about supplies? We're carrying enough food and water for maybe a week. The mining operations established supply caches at regular intervals, Milena replied. Emergency stores for workers caught in tunnel collapses or atmospheric failures. If those caches are still intact, we can resupply as we travel. And if they're not, asked Okafor. Milena met the doctor's gaze steadily. Then we make the supplies we have last as long as possible. The group debated routes and tactics for over an hour before reaching consensus. They would take the secondary route through the natural cave systems, balancing speed against security. The thermal vent passages would serve as a fallback if they encountered alien forces in the main tunnels. As the survivors settled down to rest before continuing their journey, Milena found herself standing at the cavern's edge, staring into the darkness beyond their lights. Somewhere above, alien ships maintained their silent vigil over the colony's ruins. Somewhere ahead, mining camps waited with the promise of communication equipment and rescue. Between here and there lay 200 kilometers of underground wilderness that could kill them in 1,000 different ways. But for the first time since the attack began, Milena felt something other than despair. They were 43 humans united by common purpose, carrying the knowledge and culture of their species into an uncertain future. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The darkness ahead seemed less absolute than it had before. Chapter 3: The Deep Roads. The secondary tunnel network proved to be a labyrinth of natural caves connected by mining shafts, each passage presenting new challenges. After 12 hours of travel, the survivors had covered only 20 kilometers, far slower than Milena's optimistic projections. The first major obstacle was the flooded valley, a section where underground rivers had carved vast chambers from the bedrock. The mining surveys had noted the area as prone to seasonal flooding, but the reality was worse than the data suggested. Water levels had risen dramatically, turning navigable passages into underground lakes that extended beyond their lights. Currents too strong for swimming, Webb reported after probing the water with emergency line. And we don't know how deep it gets. Milena consulted her geological scanner, searching for alternative routes. The chamber's acoustic properties suggested it was enormous, possibly extending for kilometers into the darkness. But her equipment also detected another possibility. There, she said, pointing to a narrow ledge visible along the chamber's eastern wall. Natural formation about 3 meters above the waterline. It should connect to the tunnel network on the far side. Chen squinted into the darkness. That ledge doesn't look wide enough for a footpath, let alone 43 people carrying equipment. It's not, Milena admitted. But it's what we have. The traverse took 6 hours. Emergency climbing gear from the mining supplies allowed them to secure safety lines along the treacherous ledge, but progress was measured in meters rather than kilometers. The youngest children had to be carried, while the injured required careful assistance at every step. Dr. Okafor's patient, a woman named Torres who had suffered internal injuries during the evacuation, grew steadily worse during the crossing. The doctor did what she could with limited supplies, but internal bleeding was beyond her ability to treat in field conditions. Torres died as they reached the far side of the chamber. The group gathered around her body in the pale light of fusion cells, 42 survivors paying their respects to the first casualty of the journey. Torres had been a biochemist, specializing in the atmospheric processing systems that made Kepler 442c habitable for human life. Her knowledge died with her. We can't carry her body, Webb said quietly. Every gram counts now. Milena nodded, understanding the brutal mathematics of survival. They wrapped Torres in her emergency blanket and placed her in a side passage, marking the location in case future expeditions might recover her remains. It was a small dignity, but the only one they could afford. The group continued into the deep cave network, following passages that human tools had barely modified. These were the planet's natural arteries, carved by geological forces over millions of years. The walls were smooth stone polished by ancient water flows, decorated with mineral formations that caught their lights like frozen fireworks. Beautiful and utterly hostile to human life. The air quality became their next challenge. The atmospheric processors in the mining tunnels had maintained breathable conditions, but the natural caves relied on convection and underground air currents for ventilation. Some passages carried fresh air from surface connections kilometers away. Others held pockets of toxic gases that could kill in minutes. Elena Kowalski, the 6-year-old who had become the group's mascot, was the first to show symptoms of atmospheric poisoning. Dizziness, nausea, and the telltale blue tinge around her lips that indicated oxygen deficiency. Everyone switched to suit air, Dr. Okafor ordered, her medical training overriding concerns about supply conservation. And check your atmospheric readings every 5 minutes. The environmental suits would keep them alive, but they carried only limited air supplies. Milena calculated consumption rates against their estimated travel time and felt her hope diminish. At current usage rates, they would exhaust their air reserves long before reaching the mining camps. "We need to find another route," she announced. "Something with better atmospheric conditions." Chen pointed to a side passage that sloped downward into darkness. "The thermal vents. Hot, but the convection should provide fresh air circulation." It was a risk. The thermal vent system was largely unexplored, mapped only by remote sensors during the initial geological surveys. The temperatures could exceed human tolerance, and the passages might dead-end in impassable lava tubes. But the alternative was slow suffocation in poison air. The descent into the thermal system was like entering an alien world. The temperature rose steadily as they followed natural passages carved by geothermal activity. Walls of crystalline stone radiated heat that made their environmental suits work overtime to maintain safe internal temperatures. But the air was clean. Superheated and thin, but free of the toxic compounds that plagued the upper cave system. "Sulfur content is elevated," Okafor reported, checking her atmospheric readings. "But within acceptable limits for short-term exposure." The thermal passages followed the planet's geological fault lines, creating a network that roughly paralleled their intended route. Progress was faster here. The smooth stone floors provided good footing, and the steady upward convection carried away their exhaust heat and CO2 emissions. For the first time since leaving the colony, Milena began to feel optimistic about their chances. That optimism lasted until they encountered the Guardian. It was Elena who spotted it first, a shadow moving against the thermal glow of the passage walls. At first, Milena thought it might be a heat mirage or trick of the light. Then the shadow moved with unmistakable purpose, and she realized they were no longer alone in the depths. The creature was unlike anything in Kepler 442c's recorded ecosystem. Roughly humanoid but adapted for the extreme thermal environment, skin that appeared metallic in the superheated air, movements that suggested both intelligence and predatory intent. "Native life," whispered Chen, but Milena shook her head. The geological surveys had found no evidence of complex organisms in the thermal zones. This was something else. Something that had been watching them. The Guardian, for lack of a better term, maintained its distance as the group continued through the thermal passages. It was always just at the edge of their vision, a shadow that flickered between rock formations and disappeared when they turned their lights toward it. "It's hurting us," Webb observed after the 10th sighting. "Staying parallel to our route, blocking alternative passages." Milena consulted her geological scanner, looking for patterns in their unwitting guide's behavior. The readings were disturbing. The creature was leading them deeper into the thermal system, away from the routes that would take them toward the mining camps. "We need to change direction," she decided. "Find a way back to the upper cave system." But when they attempted to backtrack, the Guardian became aggressive. Warning sounds echoed through the passages, complex harmonics that made their teeth ache in their environmental suits issue proximity alarms. The message was clear: continue forward or face the consequences. The thermal passages led them deeper into Kepler 442c's crust, following lava tubes that had been carved during the planet's violent youth. The walls here showed evidence of extreme geological forces, twisted stone formations that spoke of unimaginable pressures and temperatures. And something else. Artificial structures. The first was subtle, a section of passage wall that was too smooth, too regular to be natural. Then they began noticing deliberate modifications to the lava tubes. Support structures that weren't human in origin, but clearly showed intelligent design. "Someone else has been here," Okafor said, stating the obvious. The support structures were elegant, crystalline formations that seemed to grow directly from the rock walls. They provided reinforcement against seismic activity while channeling thermal currents for optimal air circulation. The engineering was sophisticated, suggesting a species with advanced understanding of geological processes. But the structures were old. Milena's geological training allowed her to read the signs of age in the crystal growth patterns and mineral deposits. These modifications had been made centuries ago, possibly millennia. Pre-contact civilization, she murmured. Indigenous intelligence that predated human colonization. The implications were staggering. Humanity had surveyed Kepler 442c for over a decade before establishing the colony, using every sensor technology available to catalog the planet's resources and ecosystem. There had been no indication of intelligent life, current or historical. Either the surveys had been catastrophically incomplete, or this civilization had deliberately hidden itself from detection. The Guardian led them deeper into the modified lava tubes, through chambers that showed clear evidence of past habitation. Carved alcoves that might have served as sleeping areas. Channels cut into the floors for water or other liquid circulation. And everywhere, the crystalline support structures that spoke of engineering knowledge far beyond human capability. Where are they now? Elena asked, her young voice echoing in the vast chamber they were crossing. It was Webb who answered, his security training making him notice details the others missed. They're still here. He pointed to fresh scratch marks on the crystal supports. Recently disturbed mineral deposits on the chamber floor. And most tellingly, the faint but unmistakable evidence of technological activity, electromagnetic signatures that his portable scanner detected emanating from passages deeper in the complex. The Guardian had led them to a living city. As if responding to their discovery, lights began appearing in the passages ahead. Not the harsh illumination of human technology, but soft bioluminescent glows that seemed to emanate from the crystal structures themselves. The passages came alive with shifting patterns of light that pulsed in complex rhythms. Communication, Milena realized. The lights were a language. The Guardian emerged from the shadows, moving with fluid grace across the superheated stone. In the improved lighting, they could see it clearly for the first time, a being perfectly adapted to the thermal environment, with skin that incorporated metallic elements for heat distribution and eyes that could perceive wavelengths invisible to human vision. It stopped 10 meters away and began a complex series of gestures, its movements precise and clearly meaningful. When the humans failed to respond, it repeated the sequence, adding vocal harmonics that their environmental suits translated into mathematical frequencies. It's trying to communicate, Chen said unnecessarily. Milena stepped forward slowly, her hands visible and empty of weapons. The Guardian watched her approach with obvious intelligence, its alien features showing what might have been curiosity. She tried basic mathematical concepts first, holding up fingers to indicate numbers, drawing geometric patterns in the mineral dust on the floor. The Guardian responded with its own demonstrations, showing understanding of her attempts at communication. When Milena traced the Pythagorean theorem in the dust, the Guardian completed the equation and added several variations that demonstrated advanced mathematical knowledge. They could communicate. Slowly, with difficulty, but genuine communication was possible. Over the next several hours, using gesture, mathematics, and the strange light language of the crystal structures, a story emerged. The Guardians, for there were others, many others, living in the vast underground city, were the remnants of Kepler 442c's original intelligent species. They had retreated underground millennia ago when their star system became unstable, surviving in the thermal zones while the surface became increasingly hostile to their biology. The human colony had been established directly above one of their major settlements, but they had remained hidden, watching and waiting. The alien attack had changed everything. The invaders, the devourers, as the Guardian's light language named them, were a spacefaring predator species that had been systematically exterminating intelligent life throughout this region of the galaxy. They had destroyed dozens of civilizations over the past 1,000 years, consuming their resources and leaving dead worlds in their wake. Kepler 442c was supposed to be their latest prize. The Guardian's light patterns showed images of the attack, alien ships descending from orbit, energy weapons reducing the human colony to ruins, search parties hunting for survivors. But also something else, resistance. The Guardians had been fighting the Devourers for 3 days, using their knowledge of the planet's underground systems to strike at isolated enemy units and then disappear into the thermal zones. They were losing. Their technology was defensive rather than aggressive, designed for hiding rather than warfare, but they were making the invaders pay for every victory. "They want our help," Milena said, translating the increasingly complex light patterns. "And they're offering theirs in return." The proposal was elegant in its simplicity. The Guardians would provide safe passage through their underground city, along with access to technology that could reach the mining camps in a fraction of the time required for overland travel. In exchange, the human survivors would share their knowledge of the Devourer's capabilities and help plan a coordinated resistance. It was an alliance born of desperation, between two species facing extinction. But it was also hope. Chapter 4: The Crystal City. The Guardian, who identified itself through light patterns as something that roughly translated to Stonesinger of deep currents, led them through passages that defied human understanding of underground architecture. The tunnels seemed to flow like water frozen in stone, their walls incorporating natural rock formations with crystalline technologies that pulsed with bioluminescent light. The city was vast. What Milena had initially taken for a large cave system was actually a three-dimensional metropolis extending through dozens of levels, each one adapted to different thermal zones and geological conditions. At the deepest levels, near the planet's molten core, massive thermal exchangers converted geothermal energy into power for the entire complex. Higher up, where temperatures were more moderate, vast chambers housed agricultural systems and manufacturing facilities. And everywhere, the Guardians moved with quiet efficiency through their hidden world. "Population estimate?" Webb asked as they traveled through a central thoroughfare lined with crystal formations that served as both architecture and communication network. Stonesinger's light patterns flickered in response to their translated question. The answer was sobering: fewer than 10,000 Guardians remained from a civilization that had once numbered in the millions. The retreat underground had saved them from surface catastrophes, but it had also imposed harsh limits on their society's growth and development. They were a dying race, clinging to existence in the depths of their world. Dr. Okafor studied the Guardians they encountered with professional fascination. Their biology was radically different from human, silicon-based rather than carbon, with metabolisms adapted for high-temperature environments. But their behavior showed unmistakable signs of intelligence, culture, and even art. "Look at these," she said, pointing to crystalline formations that decorated the walls at regular intervals. Under closer examination, they proved to be historical records, three-dimensional light patterns that told the story of Guardian civilization across thousands of years. Milena found herself particularly drawn to the records of first contact with the Devourers. The light patterns showed a peaceful civilization devoted to geological engineering in harmony with their world's natural systems. They had achieved a sustainable society that could have lasted for millions of years. Then the Devourers arrived. The attack patterns were disturbingly familiar: orbital bombardment followed by systematic extermination of population centers. But the Guardians had one advantage the human colonists lacked: they were already underground, hidden in thermal zones that confused the invaders' sensors. Some had survived. Not many, but enough to preserve their knowledge and continue the fight. Stonesinger led them to what appeared to be a command center, a vast chamber where crystalline displays showed real-time information about conditions throughout the planet. Surface monitoring stations tracked Devourer ship movements, while deep sensors monitored the thermal vent network for signs of intrusion. Other Guardians worked at the displays, their light pattern communications creating a constant flow of information. Milena watched the exchanges with growing amazement. This was a sophisticated intelligence network that had been observing the alien occupation for days. The tactical picture they revealed was sobering. The Devourers had established permanent bases around the human colony, with search parties extending their activities in all directions. More concerning, they were beginning deep excavations, drilling operations that suggested they were looking for something specific beneath the surface. "They know about us," Stonesinger's patterns indicated. "They search for the deep places." Webb studied the tactical displays with professional interest. "How long before they find this city?" The answer came in complex light patterns that took several minutes to translate, perhaps weeks if they continued their current search patterns, but much sooner if they detected Guardian resistance activities. The Guardians were trapped in an impossible situation. Every action they took against the Devourers increased the risk of discovery, but passivity meant watching their enemies systematically strip mine the planet for resources. "What do they want from Kepler 442c?" Milena asked. The light patterns that answered her question were among the most complex Stonesinger had used, incorporating historical records, geological data, and astronomical observations. Gradually, a picture emerged of the Devourers' true purpose. They weren't random destroyers. They were collectors. For millennia, the Devourers had been harvesting rare elements and exotic materials from conquered worlds, building some kind of massive construction project in the galactic core. Kepler 442c contained unusual concentrations of quantum-coherent crystals, naturally occurring structures that could maintain quantum entanglement across interstellar distances. The same crystals that made faster-than-light communication possible. That's why they destroyed the quantum transmitter first, Chen realized. They need those crystals for their own purposes. But the Guardians had been using quantum-coherent crystals for their own technology. Their communication systems, their power networks, even their historical records incorporated quantum structures that had formed naturally in Kepler 442c's unique geological conditions. More importantly, they knew where the largest deposits could be found. Stonesinger's next light patterns carried an unmistakable note of urgency. The Guardians had detected Devourer excavation activities near major crystal formations. If the invaders succeeded in harvesting those deposits, they would have everything they needed to complete their mysterious project and move on to the next target world, leaving Kepler 442c a lifeless husk. "Can we stop them?" Milena asked. The response was immediate, not with Guardian technology alone. Their defensive systems were sophisticated but limited, designed for hiding and survival rather than aggressive warfare. The Devourers had superior numbers, energy weapons, and orbital support. But humans had something the Guardians lacked: knowledge of the enemy's capabilities and tactics. Over the next several hours, the survivors shared everything they knew about the Devourer attack. Webb provided tactical analysis of their ship movements and search patterns. Dr. Okafor contributed observations about their biology and environmental tolerances. The alien search party showed clear signs of discomfort in high-temperature environments. And Milena offered geological expertise that proved crucial to their developing strategy. The quantum-coherent crystal formations weren't randomly distributed across Kepler 442c. They followed specific geological patterns, concentrated along fault lines where tectonic stress had created the precise conditions needed for quantum crystallization. Most of the major deposits were connected through underground structures that formed a planet-wide network. A network that could be destabilized. "You're talking about induced seismic activity," Chen said when Milena outlined her proposal. "Deliberately triggering earthquakes to collapse the crystal formations." "More than that," Milena replied, studying Guardian geological displays that showed the full extent of the quantum crystal network. "These formations are quantum entangled at the molecular level. Destabilizing one deposit should create a cascade effect throughout the entire network." The tactical implications were staggering. If they could trigger a controlled collapse of the quantum crystal network, they would deny the Devourers their primary objective while creating massive underground disturbances that would disrupt their excavation operations. It might even bring down some of their surface installations. But it would also destroy the Guardian city. Stonesinger's light patterns flickered with what might have been sadness as they discussed the plan. The Guardians had spent millennia building their underground civilization, creating a sustainable society that could preserve their knowledge and culture through any surface catastrophe. Destroying it to deny resources to the Devourers would be the ultimate sacrifice. Yet the alternative was inevitable extinction. The debate among the Guardians took hours, conducted in rapid-fire light pattern exchanges that overwhelmed the translation systems. But eventually, consensus emerged. They would implement the plan, but with modifications that might allow some of their people to escape the destruction. Deep thermal vent passages led to other underground complexes, smaller settlements that might survive the seismic catastrophe. If they could evacuate the most essential knowledge and a breeding population to those refuges, Guardian civilization might continue in reduced form. It was a desperate gamble, but no more desperate than the humans' original journey to the mining camps. Stonesinger outlined the technical requirements for their seismic weapon. The Guardian City's power systems could be overloaded to create a massive energy discharge, but it would need to be precisely timed and targeted to achieve maximum effect. The humans' knowledge of surface devourer positions would be crucial for timing the attack. More importantly, someone would need to remain behind to trigger the device. The volunteers stepped forward immediately, elder guardians whose age made them unsuitable for the evacuation journey, but whose expertise was essential for the technical aspects of the plan. They would stay behind to ensure the weapon functioned properly, knowing they would not survive the resulting seismic catastrophe. Among the humans, the decision was more complex. They needed to reach the mining camps to send word of the attack to Earth, but they also needed to coordinate with the Guardian strike to maximize its effectiveness. "We split up," Webb decided. "I'll take a small team to establish communication with the mining camps. The rest stay here to help with the evacuation and provide tactical support." It was the obvious solution, but it meant dividing their already small group in the face of overwhelming enemy forces. Every person who stayed behind reduced the chances of getting word to Earth. Every person who left reduced their ability to help the Guardians. Milena found herself volunteering to stay before she consciously made the decision. Her geological expertise was crucial for fine-tuning the seismic weapon, and someone needed to serve as liaison between the two species during the complex operation ahead. Dr. Okafor would accompany Webb's team. Her medical skills might be needed if they encountered wounded mining camp personnel. Chin would stay to help with the Guardian evacuation. His engineering background made him invaluable for technical coordination. 12 humans would attempt to reach the mining camps. 30 would remain in the Guardian City. As Webb's team prepared for departure, Stonesinger approached Milena with a final communication. The light patterns were complex, incorporating emotional subtleties that the translation system struggled to process. Gratitude, certainly. But also something that might have been hope. Two species facing extinction had found each other in the depths of an alien world. Whatever happened next, they would not face it alone.